On the cloud. Hi, I'm Tiffany Pewitt. I'm here in Austin. We're going to crack ourselves up before we get started. So I'm here in Austin, and I am here with my friend Anne. We've been friends since college, and we coincidentally both pursued paths in academia. We now both have PhDs, mine in religious studies and some practical theology, but we're both, for the past several years, have been trying to figure out our place in academia really truly as a marginalizing space, and without a lot of opportunity for the kind of traditional academic path. So we're trying to figure out what it means to be a scholar in light of these realities. So today we're having a conversation where we're going to talk about this and talk about rethinking what it means to be an academic.
Yeah, so thank you, Tiffany, for opening up the conversation. We have a propensity for silliness because we've known each other since we were 18. So
we'll try to keep the inside jokes to a minimum.
Yeah, good. That's another YouTube channel. But I thought it might be helpful to just start off with a little bit of a narrative on how I got to this place of this conversation with you, Tiffany, and maybe you want to do the same to some extent, and we can kind of talk about the issues that have unfolded for us related to our academic or scholarly identities because of our experiences. So I live in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I finished a PhD in practical theology about 7 years ago. And, you know, I took on a PhD in practical theology because I was concerned with issues of practice. And so in some ways, it's no surprise that I'm encountering the questions I am today, because I entered my doctoral program from the identity of a practitioner. And I'm still a practitioner in a lot of ways. So I work at a campus ministry at a large state university. I run their administrative wing and do program development. And I really love being a nonprofit administrator. I really love program development. But there's also a piece of me that feels sort of constantly like I'm missing the scholarly side of myself. And it's sort of this wistful longing for, you know, that piece of me that's able to have conversations about theorists and theory and theology. And so I miss that from time to time. And in order to kind of stay in that conversation, you know, part of what I do is I teach adjunct at a seminary nearby, and I, you know, try to remain in connected to my scholarly guild, which is primarily the Religious Education Association and some other scholarly guilds. But the challenge that I find is that doing that is a lot on top of an already very busy full-time job. And so for me, part of the issues that arise are very practical. How can I possibly sustain all of that? And also connected to identity. You know, how can I be both practitioner and scholar and have that work and feel like that work is not, that my scholarly work in the practical setting isn't marginal, and that my practical work in the scholarly setting isn't marginal. So in some ways it feels like I just don't fit anywhere. And so, as you know, Tiffany, we've had these conversations a lot about how we find meaningful professional identities and how we are sustained both financially and physically, spiritually, intellectually in our work lives. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. Well, and my space, I think we definitely have some overlapping experiences. And so I came to my academic studies in many ways as a practitioner as well. Before I started my PhD program, I worked at an interfaith organization for a while. And while I was working there, I did a little bit of adjuncting, and I liked the teaching experience. But I also found, as I was a program director, and I was developing programming on basically helping people better understand and navigate religious diversity. And I just found that I had a lot of more kind of critical questions especially about things like power dynamics, that I didn't feel I could really explore in the context of my job as a program director. So that's what led me to pursue a PhD. And I pursued a PhD in religious studies, which meant it was entirely centered around the academic study of religion as the subject, not, as a practitioner. And that worked for me very well. In many ways. But well, and I think once I finished, I think I was certainly open to a tenure track position and pursuing, what I see as what has been established as sort of the norm of academia, that to be, if you're successful in academia, you get a tenure track faculty position. Like, that's what we're all trained to do. That's what we're all striving for. And I was up for that. But at the same time, I was geographically constrained, needed to stay here in Austin, largely because of family issues and kind of negotiating different people's needs beyond just my own. And to be constrained to living in one place doesn't really give one many job opportunities. So I've done quite a bit of adjuncting. I continue to adjunct, but it also led me to think about other ways in which I could work in my field outside of the tenure track, and outside of just piecing together, a few classes here and there. So about 3 years ago, I started a nonprofit called the Institute for Diversity in Civic Life, really drawing a lot from my previous nonprofit experience, but reframing it a bit to better reflect my research and areas of interest. And basically the work that I do is continually been centered around the public understanding of religion. And the thing that I see, I've also continued to be really active in my scholarly guild, the American Academy of Religion. And right now I'm the regional coordinator for the Southwest region. And the thing that I'm seeing more and more as I go to these annual meetings is recognizing that in fact, most people who come out with PhDs in religious studies or theology or practical theology in all of those connected spaces do not get tenure track positions. There just aren't enough out there. They're not available. And it's just not possible for that to happen. And yet our fields continue to tell graduate students that this is what they should be striving for. So it sets people up for disappointment and to feel that they are failures. Mm-hmm. The other thing that it does as well is that in creating this norm, it completely ignores that there are some, so it's not just that the tenure track faculty member is the norm of the academic study of religion. It's that because there are so few opportunities along this path, it's mostly people in positions of privilege that get those opportunities. So it also sets up largely white male and really largely affluent people that already have come from resources.
Well, you have to have the ability to move, right? I mean, first of all, you have to be able to move far and wide for the jobs you want, which requires money.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew someone who was in my PhD cohort in Waterloo. I did my PhD in Canada, and I knew someone in my cohort who got a tenure track position in Alabama. moved there, but because he and his wife were Canadian, his wife couldn't work immediately. And so they had to live off of an assistant. They had a family of 4 that had to live off of an assistant professor's salary, which is not possible to do. And so their family was giving them money to support them until she could get, a work permit and be able to work. But a lot of people can't do that. A lot of people don't have those kinds of resources. And so, there are a lot of people, a lot of academics that are living in poverty, and there are others that are living off of other kinds of resources and support. That gets completely ignored. And sometimes that support is having a spouse with a better paid job, which is actually my situation. I am able to try to find a place for myself, try to do this kind of navigating, how can I still work in my field? Only because I have a spouse who works in the tech field, and the tech field compensates people for the work that they do. So unlike academia. But if I didn't have that and I had to support my family on my salary, I probably couldn't do this. I'd have to go find some other job.
Yeah. There are, yes, you named all of those issues so helpfully. I just wrote them down: identity, sustainability, power, gender, culture, ethnicity, and privilege. One of the things that, one of my own discoveries in the last few years, as I graduated with a doctorate and became a mother, was, as you say, sort of needing to be in particular places because of the responsibilities to care for others. Which for my family has a particular sort of cultural ethnic element to it, related that highlights the white normativity of the academy. So for my husband and I are raising a Cherokee and Choctaw child, and have chosen specifically to raise him in Oklahoma so that he can understand who he is from a cultural ethnic perspective, which means essentially that we are not going to move anywhere, just anywhere, right? Because there's a certain investment in the formation of his racial identity that can't happen just anywhere. And so, it's, for me, for people who come from communitarian cultures, from communal cultures where place is important and being close to your people is important, the value of the individual person going after, the big job is not as important as it is in sort of white normative Western highly individualistic culture. And so, the discovery that I've made in the last few years as we've moved back to Oklahoma and really invested in our son's racial identity, cultural identity development is that, that is the priority over the highly individualistic pursuit of my scholarly identity. And it's highlighted for me just how highly, Western and white that pursuit of a single person's professional ideal is. And then you lay gender over that, and the fact that mothers set aside all sorts of pieces of who they are for others. And it's just a very complicated picture.
Right. Well, and I think that, so obviously this has implications and repercussions for us personally, but I think these kinds of things have larger implications for our societies and for, what I might call the common good. And that if we allow academic scholarship to only be done by people who are privileged and affluent and able to do so, then there are a lot of voices that are left out. And I know you and I are both committed to the idea of all scholarship as being contextual, and all scholarship as, representing the very particular kinds of social locations of those scholars, whether they like it or not. And so if people who come from other cultural backgrounds, other socioeconomic backgrounds, other ethnic backgrounds, aren't able to participate in this scholarly space, then it means like what counts as scholarship is really going to be very narrow. We don't get those perspectives. And I mean, I think as well, because it becomes dominated by those in positions of power, then it's not going, that kind of scholarship is not going to be attuned enough with issues of oppression. And that's something that I'm invested in and want to see happen. I mean, I think that's one of the major values of scholarship in terms of making a contribution to society, is kind of asking those difficult questions and pushing us as individuals, as communities, towards asking questions about who we are and the kind of world that we want to create, and the kinds of relationships and policies and other sorts of things that build our worlds. And we need a lot of voices to really have robust and honest, and responsive, conversations. And I'm worried about those voices being silenced. And this is really a lot of what's, so it's my personal concern, but this is also, there's an intellectual and communal concern in this as well. And what makes me want to, like, why am I continuing to be involved in the American Academy of Religion if I really occupy this marginal space? Why do I want to continue to participate in these conversations and push people to think more about what it means to be an academic? And can we transform this norm? Can we rethink this norm of who an academic is? Well, and this is where I came up with this idea that I've mentioned to you before, of thinking about scholarship from below. So move away, like the older model is you go to these conferences, and these conferences all highlight like the academic superstars, hotshots, like the people that they've definitely gotten tenure track positions, that they've moved into being full professors. They've had their books published by major presses, major university presses, but they also have gotten a lot of support to do this work along the way. They're not doing it from the margins, right? That they follow this very traditional path. And they're the ones that are asked to give the keynotes to, they're the ones that like pack in the big audiences. They're the ones that are kind of held up as the exemplars of this is what we should all be striving for. When the reality is most of us can't be those people. And also, not that those people don't have super valuable things to contribute to the field, but they have one very particular perspective, one very contextual perspective to offer, and there are many other contexts that are being ignored. And so what about the perspectives that come from people that occupy other vocational context, other cultural context, and what can they bring to these conversations that we all need to hear?
Yeah. I really love the term you named, scholarship from below. For me, that really deeply connects to that sense of being grounded in practice, and also in a particular community with particular concerns in a particular racial, ethnic, gender identity. For me, I know those identities are different for other people. But I think what I'm most excited about related to this conversation, the conversation we can continue to have here together, is just to continue to explore what scholarship from below looks like, and how we might converse with others who can add complexity and nuance to the issues that we're raising. And maybe, and I think, in part, hopefully we can tease out some sustaining resources, practices that are sustaining for us, and more fully clarify and elaborate what scholarship from below looks like, what being a scholar from below looks like, and yeah, just have fun and explore the issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I think that not only are there different kinds of perspectives that would likely come out of this scholarship, but I think there's different kinds of values that it will embody as well. You know, being more collaborative, being more practically focused, as you mentioned, being more probably engaging, more oriented around public understanding and public conversations. But, you know, all at the same time, kind of theoretically, I think this kind of work, like at its core, really should be kind of interrogating norms of knowledge production, right? So by saying that it's not just those at the top of their field that can put out scholarship that the rest of us should pay attention to, you know, that in and of itself is saying that we should rethink like who it is that gets to set the terms for what counts as valuable knowledge, you know, valuable research. So and what are we leaving out?
Well, and I think another kind of, yes, I totally agree. And another sort of contingent hope of mine is that we are helpful in resourcing other people who come from professional backgrounds like ours or professional experiences like ours. I think one of the challenges I have is that there's not, I don't have a ready community of people that I go talk to every day about my scholarship and practice. I don't have anyone. And that's why you and I have bonded over this. And I know there are other people out there who find themselves struggling with similar questions related to their professional identities and how to bring value to their work. And so I hope we can be a resource sharing space because I know I need it. I mean, I went to recently to the annual meeting of the Religious Education Association, which is a really great space for scholars to present papers in a collaborative setting. But for me, I'm also looking for resource sharing. You know, I'm looking for, you know, how do I do transformative how do I practice transformative pedagogies online? I have no one to talk about that. I have no one to talk with about that. And that's a place where I can talk about it, but I have to find, you know, a space to talk with people over drinks about it because there's no sort of formalized space to talk about those things. In my mind, I'm thinking because, you know, people in tenure track positions have they have the opportunity to talk with one another about that when they're at work. We just don't have that opportunity. Right. So, you know, I think from a practical perspective, I hope moving forward that we can, you know, explore the identity and sustainability issues, also offer spaces for resource sharing, kind of legitimize what scholarship is and looks like, and provide spaces for different kind of voices to emerge.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I need all of those things for myself personally, but and I know others that need that as well. And I also think that there's a self-care element to this as well, that if you tell yourself that there is one model of success in your field and you don't embody that, then, you know, you can just feel like a failure. And that feeling of failure, even when you move into like trying to find ways to work in your field, that feeling of failure can completely sabotage, you know. And so I think to better kind of articulate the work that we're doing, our own particular kind of social locations and situations, but also to be able to make claims for our own agency, like, you know, to shift the narrative away from we're doing these things because our careers didn't work out.
Because we're not doing those things. Right.
So instead to like, no, actually, the things that we're doing are really valuable. And they're the things that we want to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, how can we do this and find some kind of energy and momentum from that?
Yeah. Yeah. I like it.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it.
All right. So we have many more conversations to have.
Yes. I'm excited.
Me too. Hopefully with more folks.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Okay. Well, let's talk more soon.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon.